One of the reasons I have asked Dr. Thawilwadee to join us is because of this GRB, gender responsive budgeting. This is a new, the gender issues and gender focus during this crafting exercise, not just a draft, it's a crafting, trying to deliberate a draft that will have long-lasting life and effect. It's new. We haven't had this before. This is the first time. Okay, the next step, I think we'll ask Ajahn Jade now. Ajahn, we'll have to hear from you about the MMP, perhaps an elaboration on the MMP, on the sources of the Senate, how the Senate will be chosen, and perhaps the Prime Minister. I think a lot of people want to know about the situations where Prime Minister can be a non-MP, and then these various assemblies and councils that we've heard about.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Thitinan. Good morning, distinguished guests. You actually threw me all the hot issues, Ajahn Thitinan, all the political realm that people are keeping their eyes on and opening their ears, and all of what they wanted to hear basically are political issues, and that to a surprise to a lot of us, that many of the issues, for example, like gender responsive budget that Dr. Thawilwadee was just presenting, seem to be something very new and something that people should keep their eyes on and should feel a praise for our country to do such things. Or what Ajahn Suchit mentioned about that we are causing the people to be better in some way, especially politicians, as well as we making clear the citizenry, how the distinction between just being regular people and being citizen would differ, and how you enhance the political arena in order to put the strength to the people. These kind of things should be put on the front page of the newspaper and be focused on more. But instead, the focus is always on the political things, political issues. The politicians never talk about all the rights and liberties that we added on lots and lots and lots, and we're still adding on. So needless to say how people think, but it's just pretty much a pity somehow that when I look into a constitution like the US Constitution, of course, it's pretty a shame if we compare our constitution to that one, because even our first constitution is of course longer than the United States Constitution. And to be fair to every other constitution around the world, if you say the United States Constitution is the shortest with 7 articles, you have to put all the 7 articles, including the sections. So if you put all the sections together, it's about 24 altogether. And if you plus the amendment, 27 amendment. But the first 10 amendment was done a little bit after the Constitution was crafted. And when we look all around, one of the very nice statistics to see is that within 200 something years, the United States has revised its constitution only about 17 times. And the two of the revision, you probably know, abolition or something have to do with alcoholic, and they just undo that. So it means overall it's about just 15 amendments. And the Bill of Rights are the 1 to 10th amendment. We talk among ourselves in the CDC. Do we want to have such constitution? Of course. I think if you look around, everybody would want to have that kind of constitution. The German constitution, the French constitution, the British constitution, which lasts for 800 something years, and it was not even written in one document. But if you say that in the UK, and we have our ambassador here, maybe he will be able to elaborate more. But if you say the UK doesn't have a written constitution, yes, it's not written in one document, but it's spread in many, many acts. And you can see, I don't have to name them. So that means a constitution of any country would have to be written somehow, even if you call it an unwritten one. It's written somewhere. And if it's a convention, the convention will have to show itself somehow. That would be nice if our constitution can be done that way. But one of the issues, especially pointed by Dr. Thawilwadee just earlier, something like the general responsive budget. Would a constitution draft last 200 years, last 100 years? Think of gender responsive budget, would you see something like that? And if we look into some main issues, for example, in political arena, in this country, ever since the first election, all women were able to vote because we didn't have any problem with women's suffrage. But of course, we still have some of the gender differences. The Austrian constitution, which was just amended not long ago, added something like GRB. Of course, in many other countries, you don't need to do that because it might come by nature. 315 articles or sections here that we have. Comparing to our own constitution, the Constitution of 1997, now we are about 16,000 words, more than that constitution. Comparing to the latest constitution, the Constitution of 2007, we are about 10,000 words, more than that constitution. But if you look into what we've been trying to add into, for example, what Ajahn Thitinan was asking me about the mixed member proportional, all those other issues Professor Suchit already mentioned. But one of the main things that we want to bring into the reality of this country is that ever since the 1997 Constitution that we used the parallel system between the constituency and the party list, there has never been proportionality. And proportionality is very important because otherwise the real will of the voters, of the electorate, will not be shown in all the parties, especially in the list. And when you make a combination of both, what you will see is proportionality. Only one thing that we actually change drastically to the constituency and the party list. But with that simple drastic change, what it will bring to the country is the real will of the people in election. Because normally, if you look into the constituency, especially ones that Professor Suchit just mentioned, the first past the post, it was still kept first past the post and first past the post. Even though you have the party list, it will still be first past the post all the way until now, if we didn't change it. But the change will not make the first past the post just first past the post. The first runner-up, the second runner-up, the third runner-up, of course, in the constituency, there will not be the MP. But all the votes gave to them would be coming to the party list, pretty much. Especially the majority decided not to allow independent candidate, which in many respects, that is also a situation in which in other country they might not encounter. But in Thailand, we encounter a situation in which you will have plenty of nominees coming into as an independent candidate. So we eliminate the independent candidate. When the independent candidate is eliminated, then it's only the party list. And the party list consisting of all these political parties. And not only that, we think that if we eliminate all the small people, then what stance would they have and how would they be able to come into the parliament or come into the house? So we decided to make a political group, which is, so to speak, all of you are familiar with political parties. Political group is a mini political party. So small people can get together and to run for election. Instead of running as an independent candidate, they run as a group. And that's one of the ways in which the strength of the political group will one day turn themselves into political party. And if they so choose to remain being political group, the stance of each political group will be stronger and stronger and will be clearer and clearer to the public, and the public will be able to choose them out of what they stand for. So at the last one on the mixed member proportional is that we will be the first country, because all the other 9 countries using the mixed member proportional, they use the closed list. We'll be the first country to use the open list, whether that's good or not. We're open for the comment. But one of the problem, again, here in this country is that, of course, you see, the orders of those people who are in the list, when it was a closed list, was the owner of the party, so to speak, or the funders of the parties, and many other people that a lot of time the voters didn't really want them, but the voters still have a goodwill for the party. So now if the voters vote for the party, they have a chance to also select a person out of that party. So out of all the list, for example, if Miss A is number 18 on the list, and this party list can only house 11. However, the people select Miss A from number 18, and a large number of the people select her. So she turned out to be number 1 on the list. Now with her number 18, and only 11 people are allowed from this list, she will never be in parliament. But thanks to the open list, what will come is that she will be able to get into the parliament by way of election, direct election of the people, direct selection of the people. So this is the overall picture of the MMP that we bring to Thailand. The second thing is the pluralist Senate. We also thought of a lot of comments given to us that should we still keep the bicameral system? Should we still have the two houses? Should we have the House of Representatives and the Senate together? Do we need them? And we come to an idea that if we have a Senate that comes from direct election, just like the one used in the 1997 Constitution, what need should we have them? Why do we need to have them? It's just the same as the House of Representatives, no difference. And they act pretty much the same. They talk pretty much the same, and they work pretty much the same. And all in all, after around 6 or 7 years of the Constitution of 1997, they became the same people of the member of the House. So if we are to keep the Senate, we have to make it different. And we have to be able to strike the balance between the Senate and the House. If we can't strike this balance, why should we have the Senate? Therefore, we come up with a, people call them a three-river Senate. Okay. One is from the self-selection between these former permanent secretary and some other government officials, including people from the realm of professionalisms. The second one is from the overall professions and I would say occupations around the country. And I myself would want the housewife or house husband or anyone who work at home to also be able to share their part in the Senate, because otherwise who will speak for them? They should have their representative. So all these people will be selected by a selection committee. Out of the selection committee, then afterwards, these people will be elected by the local administration. So that's the second type of rivers. The last one is the 77 people from 77 province. This will be in 2 ways, and we're still thinking of which of the ways will be more appropriate. The one is that anyone can run, and one from each province will be the senator. The other one is from a selection committee. The selection committee will send 10 people to each province, 770 people, and then you will have a selection or an election from the people. You have one from each province, so down to 77. So these are the 3 rivers of the Senate. And what will they be doing more from other constitution? They will be able to propose laws. But of course, because they are the Senate, and the way in which they came is not through direct election like the House. Therefore, they cannot have the equal power, especially to pass law like the House. The House will still be the last body to pass the law. If the Senate proposed the law, throughout the process, in the end, the House can still knock down the law. If the House proposed the law, the Senate can stop the law, can hold it for a certain period of time. However, in the end, it will be up to the House to pass the law. So we keep the parliamentary system, or we keep the the power of each house in the way in which the whole world is doing to it, and which pretty much is more right. Okay. The second thing is that whenever that comes to important issues, we will put the Senate together with the House as the Parliament, and they will work together in order to push out the important issues of the country. Because otherwise, if we only leave it to the Senate, or if we only leave it to the House, that's not the whole representative of the country. We want the whole representative of the country to be able to share, join, and work together. The last thing that I would say here that Jan Thitinan was asking me was on the Prime Minister. Why we make two distinctions between the Prime Minister that comes from the Member of Parliament and the one that is not. Because if we don't make a distinction, of course you would feel why a person which is an MP and a person which is not an MP can come into a position of the Prime Minister just the same. The second thing is that would people, especially people in the NCPO, of course all the eyes are looking at them, be coming as a prolonging power? Are they going to hold on their power? Are they going to ask some party to propose themselves? Or are they even now setting up a party and one day they will be in that party, they will come back again? Perhaps those are all the questions, but we don't really think hitting into all those questions too much. We just think about fairness, that people who are the MP were already elected from the people directly. So in order to get these people to be the PM, you just need a simple majority, more than half, that's fine. But if a person who is not the MP being proposed by all the MPs with only simple majority, that will not be fair to all the people, because the people elect all these MP. If you want someone to be the PM, which is not an MP, then it must be a supermajority. So we said 2/3 instead of just a simple majority, just more than half. Is 2/3 easy? Think among us here. If now we've been listening to all of the speakers for around an hour, and people outside of the room would want to hear what has been spoken in this room. One of a person walk into this room, just walk into this room, say, okay, I'll be the person who will explain it. Who do you think will be able to explain better? Between all of us sitting in this room, what has been spoken this morning, and another person who just walked in. But if we so choose that that person speak with 2/3, that means it's the majority, a more than just simple majority of us. So if the 2/3 of the MP decided that a person who is not among themselves MP would need to be proposed as the Prime Minister, and they so select with 2/3 for that person to be Prime Minister, we don't see the problem. And we see the legitimacy in setting this rule. Because otherwise, it wouldn't be fair, as I said. So this is why we come up with the Prime Minister within two different prongs. And why are we not setting clear in times of need, in essential time, in chaos, in so on and so forth, whatever you name them? Then the Prime Minister who is not an MP would come into the picture, and you will be able to take this person as the MP or PM, okay, whoever you want, but only in times of need. Who will be judging that sort of time? I think all of you that have spent some time here in this country would see. In that such time that a lot of people see that it's already time in need, do all the people, or does everybody see the same time in need? We don't want that to happen, so we leave it up to the MP. If there's such time, they can use 2/3 of the majority to get someone else in. Or if they still want the MP, they just get this simple majority, and they get the person. So these are what we've been trying to put in, and the very last but not least, like what Professor Suchit was saying, we attempt to reform the country and to bring reconciliation to the country. Though might be idealistic, but perhaps if you see better ways of dealing with it, you can tell us, especially when we try during the time that we're drafting our constitution. It's just like Dr. Thawilwadee was saying, we look up many constitutions. We look up the French constitution, the German constitution, the US constitution, the Japanese constitution. Okay? A lot of things that we wrote, for example, mentioning the Japanese constitution, we pulled out a lot of tradition from Japan. But if we keep it traditionally like the Japanese, would it work here in this country? We decided it wouldn't work. I see a lot of smile. So we turned the tradition into words. So it will be practical. And that is why now our constitution is about 53,000 words. But of course, we're not the longest in the world. Okay? I'm not sure whether anybody in this room is from India. I'm not picking on you, but the Indian constitution is written in the internet, in every source, as the longest constitution, consisting of about 100,000, which we are now about half of that. Okay? So sometimes you just have to compare yourself to something which is longer, not something which is shorter, okay, to make you feel better. So that's how we try to see ourselves. And I think myself, Dr. Thawilwadee, Dr. Suchit, and all the other members are open for comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ajahn Jade. Thanks very much. Very quickly, as a follow-up, on election day, when inside the voting booth, what are the mechanics? What does it look like? 2 ballots? Please elaborate just a little in detail the MMP, how it works.
I would say 3 ballots. Okay, 3 ballots. One is for the constituency. The other one is for the party list, and the last one is for a person in the list. So you will have 3 crosses. Okay. A lot of people were advising that since we use the open list, why don't we allow the people to mix all the numbers? We think that's a bit too complicated, and that will cause more problems. So just a cross of one name, one number, that will be helping a lot. So 3 ballots.
Okay, and the number of MPs is
250 in the constituencies, and 200 up to 220 in the party list.
Right.
The reason it is 200 up to 220 is that because it has to open rooms to hold on to the overhang mandate.
Right. Yes. So the open list is designed to overcome the previous party list structure. Yeah, because the previous structure is sequential. So in this case, open list means if you pick whoever person A, that person with enough votes can be the party list MP, regardless of the party list sequence.
That's right. Okay. One of the weaknesses that has to be encountered in the open list is that if you allow an open list to be selected by the people without having a quota or a threshold within the list, it might not be fair to all those electorates who would want the list to be kept the same.
Okay, we'll come back to you on this. Let me proceed to Ajahn Panitan and 2 of my colleagues here, Professor Panitan Wattanayagorn and Professor Siripan Nogsuan, Sawasdee. First, Ajahn Panitan, he also works with the KPI as a director of one of the programs at the King Prashatipok Institute. He is also currently the advisor of the principal advisor of the Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister General Prawit Wongsuwan. Ajahn Panitan. So he has a government view slash academic view.
Yes, thank you very much, Ajahn Jade, for hosting this very important event. I'll be very brief, since you already know the government's positions and views. There's no need to elaborate further, but let me begin by saying that the NCPO, the National Council of Peace and Order, and the government is committed to the roadmap. And so far, we are now halfway through the roadmap. We are in the preparation for the conclusion of the drafting of the Constitution. And after this, there should be a decision made on the referendum by the NCPO and by the Cabinet. and then if there is a referendum, then it may take a few more months to do, and then preparation for the organic laws to be in place for the election. So since the beginning of the coming of this government, you realize that the first order is to stabilize the situation, to make sure that peace and stability is installed, to make sure that stable environment is created, enough for the drafting of the constitution to proceed forward. And I think that is on course. For those who doubt that we are not derailing from the roadmap, please let us know which derailment or which problems that you see that we are not committed to the roadmap. But of course, we still only halfway, a few more months before we can complete the roadmap. And Professor Thitinan last night in a separate forum at the FCCT already predicted that after the roadmap is completed, chaos, demonstration will return in Thailand. So that's not the responsible of the government. If we leave the office, it's responsible of the new elected government. So I have 4 objectives, I think, to share with you relating to this drafting. Number 1 is, of course, it is very important for the government to, especially the security agency, to provide a stable environment for this. So safe and secure and stable environment is to be provided. This is why we are very determined to make sure that all demonstrations relating to the drafting have to be very much monitored or very much approved. If you allow one group coming out against another group, the drafting of the constitution may be derailed. So we are in communication with many political groups to ask them cooperation for them to provide a stable environment. That's number 1. Number 2, in order to do that, this year, I think the government encourages more participation of stakeholders in the drafting process. Ajahn Thawilwadee and many other fora, as you have already seen, throughout the country, a part of that open space. And if you monitor about 600 satellite TVs in Thailand, if you have time to monitor 6,000 community radios in Thailand, if you have time to pick up any newspapers in Thailand, many of them in particular, for those political TVs, have very, very intense comments on the drafting, on the political process, or on the performance of the government, especially those unregistered community radios, still 3,000 of them. I advise you to listen to them carefully. They're very strong in wordings, they're very strong in comments in this regard. I think that is encouraged. So far, if they are not enticing people to come out fighting each other on the streets. This is why lifting of the martial law is planned since last year. This is why the use of the Article 44 to curb down the martial law, to come up with the new 14 regulations to be specific in terms of how the security agencies can operate in this new environment. The environment that stakeholders should participate more in the drafting of the constitution. So that is the intention. That is the objective, and that's the second point that I would like to make. The third point is, of course, the government wishes to see progress is made in the drafting of the constitution, especially on many standing issues in our political conflicts. I think Ajahn Suchit mentioned very well the intentions. I will not go into the details of the CDC's intentions, but of course we wishes to see the new framework of governance, a new perhaps rules and regulations. I didn't realize that it's very long, Ajahn Jade, 50,000 words. I'm not so sure that many of us have time to read that, but we have to read that. I think that's part of our duty. But I think the progress, we wish the progress should be made on the conflict between political parties. That's one area that you might also try to look forward to. These two political parties in Thailand in the last 2 or 3 decades. Of course, we have about 10 to 15 political parties made it to the parliament election in the last decade. Among 50 to 63 political parties, Ajahn Siripan Nogsuan is more knowledgeable about these numbers, how many political parties. But seem to me, and seem to me from your studies, that there's only 2 main political parties, and they need reform themselves. But they also need to reconcile. They need to somehow work within the new framework that the CDC will provide them. I'm not so sure they agree with the CDCs, but it is important for them to work in this framework. Second, of course, we wish to see that the administrative conflict between institutions, between political institutions in Thailand be addressed in this new framework. I think Professor Bunbongkarn, head of the CDC, went into detail in many places about 9 areas of conflicts in Thailand that it needs to be addressed and balanced. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but we wish at the end of the drafting, those problems will be addressed by this constitution. And lastly, of course, among conflicts among the political groups, and of course against elected governments must be addressed. Not only parties, not only institutions and courts, but now citizens, they are empowered themselves and creating color politics, color church, and different groups and offsprings of these political groups, and they are quite dynamic and powerful in many regards. We wish to see a new framework for them. The empowerment issue or element should address in this area. That's the third objective. On top of providing the stability, encouraging the participation among stakeholders, and of course, if the progress is made on these standing conflicts, I think we should be able to do fine. And lastly, of course, very new in this constitution, I'm not a constitutional expert, but it is interesting to see that the constitution drafters are now trying to address reforms for the future of Thailand. There are about 11 reform areas that the government is passing to the CDC and NRC, and others. Of course, this is about social justice. At the beginning of this talk, Professor Suchit mentioned about this key element. I think the Thai people have woke up to the new reality that they need more justice. They need more, equal rights. They need more space, and these reform areas must address that. So together, 4 objectives that we wish to see. You realize that the NCPO, the government, the Prime Minister stays clear from creating a pressure on the drafting process. So far, Prime Minister and administrators have not commented on any of this process. This is up to the CDC, it's up to the stakeholders to work together. Although these drafters handpicked by the coup group, but as you can tell, Professor Suchit, Professor Thawilwadee, Professor Jade, independent minds, I cannot influence them. I cannot even talk to them on these issues. From time to time, we disagree on certain issues, but these are independent mind people. These are the people who drafted one of the best, if not the best, constitution in the country, including Professor Bunbongkarn himself. So, if you have rights to doubt these people, but talk to them, work with them, and I'm sure that in the end, the Thai people will vote or will give them, a passing or failing grade in the next few weeks. The government realizes that this is a very high stake, I think, but the government is also quite realistic and realize that number one, reconciliation may take time, years maybe, experience in many countries. Maybe it will take a generation or 2 to be successful. On average of 83 years of democracy, we have one prime minister every 3 years. We have 19 constitutions. We have 61 cabinets. And this statistic is not anything to be proud of. But still, number two, Thailand still has a long way to go before becoming a consolidated democracy. We realize that. But according to many studies, I think finally, we find ways to come up with a new path. And I think in the end, my last comment on this issue, I think with the new elements being put in the constitution, empowerment, social justice, many reform issues, I think the government hopes that in the end the Thai people will see what's going on. In the end, the Thai people will tell their politicians that they need to move on. They need to, be more responsible for the country. Thailand cannot be in this stage too long. The military is reluctant, according to my perception. You may not agree, to take control of power. It's not easy. You can tell the frustrations. You can tell the uneasiness of the Prime Minister governing the country. He is a very frank and open-minded person. He's not comfortable in his position compared to many last generals who are prime ministers in Thailand. This prime minister is different. I'm not so sure you agree with me or not, but he tells us every day that he's leaving. But you tell us every day that he's not leaving. So I'm not so sure which one is the truth. But in the end, I think throughout the drafting of the constitution, we hope that the CDC, the NCPO hope that the Thai people finally will tell their politicians to stop fighting, to begin to reconcile, to begin to really push the country forward, to begin to pick on this framework and improve upon it, to make sure that they will not return the country to chaos, something that Professor Thitinan already predicted. But we hope that Ajahn Thitinan is wrong, and the people will tell their representative to get on, with it, so the military will not come back, and we can extend the coup interval, periods from now 8 years to 6 years, and from 6 years now to 8 years, and now in the next few years, maybe more than that. So I think that the final success of this drafting lies upon that, democratic path and democratic changes of the government, in the future. I think that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajahn Panitan. Professor Panitan has given us a flavor, a view from Government House, from the NCPO. He also has a unique way of predicting my predictions. Last night he said that I predicted riots. I don't use the word riot. I just don't use the word riot in my writing or speaking. So no riots. And then he says chaos. I don't use the word chaos in my writing and speaking. So no chaos. But I would say that if there's anything, that there will be growing tension going forward. So that's a kind of a mild tension. Now I come to my colleague, my dear colleague, Professor Siripan, and I'm sorry that you're sitting far away. She's different than the rest, constitution drafters we have, government advisor, but she's just a professor here teaching comparative politics, government. She's followed the constitution drafting process and the various constitutions of Thailand, and she has written a number of articles, and let's hear what you have to say as an independent, Ajahn Siripan, independent scholar, academic professor here.
Thank you, Professor Jay. Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to address such a distinguished audience. I'm here today because Professor Thitinan asked me to play a role of the opposition. So I will do my part. I will have a constructive criticisms with my all due respect to all the panelists here. Professor Suchit, he's my former professor when I was a graduate here, so I have to be very careful, very much talking today. Like I said, I will try to give my constructive criticism with all my due respect. The panelists here have contributed a lot to the drafting, or in terms of Professor Thitinan crafting what might be the 2015 Thailand's constitution. I really do believe in their sincere intentions, but I have some reservation, and I talk today. I will start with my concern over what might be the problems and the pitfalls of the 2015 constitutions. After that, I will evaluate its possible effects on Thailand's political landscape if the constitution is promulgated. Finally, I wrap up my presentation. Please interrupt me if there's something need to be clarifying, or there will be some discussion at the end. The focal point of my talk is my concern that this constitution soul and body are contradictory. Soul and body of constitution are contradictory. The soul of this constitution can be found in Article 3, which saying the sovereign power belongs to the people. But the constitution contents reveal otherwise somehow. Let's start with the background. As Professor Thitinan and Professor Suchit had explained to us, that Thailand has had 4 constitution changes for the past 18 years. The first, 1997, 2007, the amendment in 2011, and the current one, 2015, interim constitution. The major reason for such frequent changes is to counter past experiences, mainly focus on a distrust of elected representatives. I understand well the need to keep politicians in check, but I have some disagreement on how to do so and who should do it. In my view, there are 3 pitfalls that might undermine this constitution, namely unintentional consequences. Second, devaluation of elections. And the third one, unaccountability. I will touch upon them in order. I will point out 2 measures that might cause outcomes deviate from the original intentions. Professor Jade told us about a mixed member proportional representation system with an open list electoral system. This is new. I myself have no objection over the MMP nor the party list. I believe that the MMP is designed to reflect the will of the people, and the open list is designed to counter the manipulation and domination of the party's executive, and especially in Thailand case, the party's leader. However, to combine those systems together, it might cause or induce more vote buying and patronage. It might induce more vote buying and patronage. Why it is so? Because the MMP has the constituency candidates, and the open list is also emphasized on the constituency candidates. It's like the same thing, because people can vote for the candidate on the list. Therefore, candidate-oriented mode of election will return, and that might induce more vote buying, because the candidates on the list are competing against each other, and they will have to campaign for themselves. That's candidate-oriented, and that can induce more vote buying, which has been a problem in Thailand for so long. So this is, for me, is like a double doses that will create more candidate-oriented and might as well restrain some of party development in the future, because parties' programs will be less important. Candidate will become more important. Secondly, the draft requires that half of the MPs can bring down the administration to a vote of no confidence. Yet, as stipulated in the draft constitution, said that a vote of no confidence motion would not only lead to the end of administration, but also to the termination of the House as well. In other words, if the House won a vote of no confidence, the PM will have to resign and at the same time dissolve the House of Representatives. In this case, in this context, I doubt that the MP will give a really serious censor debate over the Prime Minister because they don't like to stand for a new election so soon. In short, these two measures that I pointed out seem to show that an attempt to solve one problem might in turn generate bigger troubles that the constitutional architect did not anticipate. So this wraps up my first point of unintended consequences. The second pitfalls that I will talk about is unaccountability of independent commissions. The distrust in the majority wisdom has led to some details on how the government should operate. The draft constitution proposes to transfer the power from the mistrusted politicians to several new independent commissions. The fundamental and basic question in institutional design is who will check the watchman? Who will watch the watchman? In this case, the newly established independent commissions, such as Professor Suchit mentioned, the National Ethics Council. Who will watch them? Who will have the power to make them accountable to the people? Because this council seems to have a lot of power to conduct background checks and set moral standards for public officials. I can understand when the drafting committee want to create good system of government, but when they want to reserve for good people to run it, I think that's a problem. The reason is the definition of a good person is vague. We have witnessed many kinds of conflict of interest and corruptions among the CDC and the National Assembly as well. So how can we define and find good people? That is a difficult task. The third and the last pitfall that I mentioned today is devaluation of election. As Professor Jade mentioned to us that the CDC entrusts the House of Representatives with nominating whoever they see fit to be the Prime Minister, even though they said in time of crisis. First, who will define the time of crisis? Who will say now we need non-elected MP? That means the Prime Minister would not have to be elected. Essentially, anyone could become Prime Minister provided he or she is picked by the House of Representatives. The bottom line is the election will become less meaningful and turn out to be only a political ritual because voters' decisions might not determine who will be the Prime Minister, and I think that is a problem. Moreover, the empowerment of the half-elected, half-selected Senate with the function of screenings will cast doubt on the checks and balances system because half of them are not elected, but they are empowered with more authority. Now we come to my last point, the prospect of the new constitution. There are 2 points that I want to highlight here. First, my concern is that the constitution will not deliver on its purpose of bringing all the ties together. So far, the public seems to be aloof. That's my sense. Maybe due to frequent reforms in Thailand and they get tired of it, and maybe due to fear. The public's exclusion from the process raises ownership and legitimacy questions that will affect the constitution's acceptance. Another prospect is that Thailand and Thai politics is at risk of traveling back to the pre-1997 era, when the Prime Minister was too busy reshuffling the cabinet and political parties were too fragmented and too weak to offer concrete and doable policies. We can imagine that those kind of contexts and conditions are not healthy for Thailand if we want to walk on the road of democracy. That concludes my talk. I like to leave you anyway with a thought. I think with good intentions, people might want to turn the clock back to the time when we feel secure and comfortable, but the real times is moving forward. So are the people. Thank you very much.